Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Live Inside GWM. My name is Luke Huysmans, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you joining me today. This is your backstage pass into the world of GWM. Now, whether you're a long-time fan, a curious customer, maybe part of our amazing dealer network, or this is the first time you're learning about GWM, we guarantee you'll get something out of this event. Now, while we are live, this is the perfect opportunity for you to have your questions answered by our experts. So if you haven't already, start putting them into a comment below. We're watching, we're listening, and we'll get to as many as we can a little later on. Before we jump in, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're on today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. So, let's dive in. Today, we're going big, and the spotlight is on GWM's full range of electrified vehicles. With the government's proposed new vehicle efficiency standard and just general buzz around EVs, plug-in hybrids, and hybrids, we're going to dive into how GWM is gearing up for an electric future. And then we're going to jump into what the NVES means for the entire automotive industry here in Australia. So to get you all up to speed, I'd now like to welcome back the Head of Marketing and Communications for GWM Australia and New Zealand, Steve Maciver. Steve,
Luke,
welcome.
how are you?
What an entrance.
Good evening, everyone.
A silent entrance.
Indeed, indeed.
Mate, you've assembled quite the fleet of vehicles around us.
We certainly have.
Why, especially these models here today, why is this fleet so important for GWM now and moving into the future?
Great question, Luke, and good evening, everyone. Look, as Luke said, we've arranged a whole range of GWMs here, and this is our GWM electrified range. Why it's very important for us is that, of course, we're heading into a bit of change in the industry. Legislation changes, technology changes, and we're here today to demonstrate the breadth of capability that GWM's got, and that's what's sitting here right behind us, a range of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and EVs from GWM. So, yeah, here to talk about what that electrified future looks like for GWM.
Well, speaking of electric, you just rolled in on the pure EV Ora. So you've got everything from that to the brand new H6 behind me. So maybe we can start with telling us why one model of EV, then to maybe let's talk about the H6 GT because that's just been launched as well.
Absolutely. Look, I think one of the things we've talked about previously on previous Inside GWM live streams is the importance of this democratisation of technology. We as a brand are developing and investing in a number of powertrain technologies. Hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and EV is part of that as well. Now obviously Ora is our EV sub-brand sitting underneath GWM. So pure battery electric EV. Again, suitable for some people, it's not for everyone, but again, EV is a place that we're continuing to develop and there's going to be a lot more to come from Ora in the next 12, 18, 24 months. This car here, the H6 GT PHEV, is a very, very important car for us.
Oh, so these things happen when you're live.
This car here, the H6 GT PHEV, has been recently launched and has been a very successful model for us. This car's been in the market in its petrol guise for the last couple of years now, but PHEV is relatively new for us. Why this car is important is it is GWM's first plug-in hybrid vehicle, and it's class leading. 180 k's of pure EV range. Now, if you think about what that means for your average Australian consumer, your average customer is going to commute in Australia roughly 30 k's a day. So if you do that commute in this car, you can run it on pure EV power, 150 k's a week. In theory, you can run this as a pure EV 5 days a week, plug it in at the weekend. But of course, you've got the advantage. If you want to go on a road trip, you've got that internal combustion engine to give you that increased range of over 1,000 k's there. Equally, if you want to use it as an EV all the time, you're going to go from 20% charge to 80% charge in roughly about 23 minutes. So really, really usable as an EV, as an internal combustion, or a combination of both.
And I'm going to say too, I have been lucky enough to drive this and it is incredible.
It is a rocket ship. This car here, 4.9 seconds 0 to 100. So again, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, shall we say. It is a performance SUV, but again, significantly stacked with tech, significantly stacked with value. So an important car for us in terms of a benchmark and laying down our position in terms of preparedness for the rollout of plug-in hybrid technology, we think is going to be really important for the industry and for the market and for Australian consumers over the next 12, 18, 24 months.
And let's not keep the conversation to the GT because obviously the H6 wanted our attention. this isn't even available yet, is it?
Not yet launched, and again, those of you who've been tuning into these live streams over the past few months will have seen this car unveiled to you previously, but this is the all-new GWM Haval H6. So you're going to be seeing this land in Australia and New Zealand over the next couple of months. When it comes here initially, it will come with petrol. We're not moving away from petrol, but what we're saying today is that the rollout of this technology, hybrid plug-in hybrid technology, also gives us as a brand and customers the opportunity to choose diesel or petrol if they want to do that as well. But this car will come initially in petrol and also in hybrid. Later this year, we're also going to be launching plug-in hybrid in this vehicle. So this vehicle, when it lands, will be GWM's 4th plug-in hybrid vehicle. So you begin to see how quickly that plug-in hybrid range is beginning to expand.
But yeah, I mean, the range just keeps growing and growing. And I know one model that's extremely important for the Australian market, and I know a lot of people out there are dying to know more about it, the Canon Alpha.
Again, very, very important car for us. We're one of the first in this segment to bring plug-in hybrid technology to an Australian full-size dual cab ute. It is class leading in many, many ways. We've learnt lessons from the development of the recent Canon. The feedback that we had from the media, from our dealers, from the market itself, customers, was a couple of things. Number one, 3-ton or 3.2-ton towing probably wasn't enough for the Australian consumer. 3.5 is where we needed to get to. And that's exactly what we did in Canon. We've taken the lesson from that car and we've rolled it out across this car. So this car, again, is a fully plug-in hybrid vehicle, will give you 3.5-ton towing capacity. Where this car is different from some of the other plug-in hybrids that may have already hit the market is that this is powered by what's called GWM's High 4T technology. Now, a reminder for those of you, we've talked about High 4T before. High 4T is the name for GWM's off-road tank-based plug-in hybrid technology. This car is built on the Tank Professional off-road platform. What that means for consumers is that the technology under the skin here, we've got a mechanical four-wheel drive system with locking diffs. We're not relying on motors at the rear of the car, which probably don't give us the performance we need off-road. We've got a world-class four-wheel drive system under the skin in this car. So not only is this car going to be capable of giving you a class-leading 110 k's of pure EV range,
which is impressive in its own right.
Absolutely. So again, you've got that drivability, you've got the efficiency on-road with that. You've got 3.5-ton towing, which is the standard in Australian and New Zealand dual cab utes, but you've also got world-class four-wheel drive driving technology. And for us, this is why we think this car is going to be a game changer in the ute segment in Australia.
So proper 4x4 off-roading, and as you said, it is GWM's 4x4 platform, and for maybe people joining us for the first time tonight, you can also find that in a couple of other models.
Not just yet, but coming. So essentially, we've talked about how the GT PHEV is GWM's first plug-in hybrid, already on sale, already available across Australia and New Zealand. The Canon Alpha PHEV is going to be landing next month. We're expecting first shipments of that to come through. Indeed, we've got a couple of pre-production models already out doing a bit of stuff, and you're going to see some content coming through over the next couple of days, not only just on our channels, but some of the media channels that you might go to, showing this car conquering some really extreme four-wheel drive territory. I must say, some territory that perhaps some other competing brands haven't quite been able to conquer. So we're very proud of what this car can do. But this car will be our second plug-in hybrid, Luke. Beyond that, as we said, this car here, the H6, will be available in plug-in hybrid by the end of the year. Then the Tank 500 up the back there, that's going to be our 4th addition to the range this year. You're going to see that car around about Q3. So it's about plug-in hybrid for us, but of course we go all the way from the Jolion hybrid technology, which is the most accessible hybrid we have in the range, all the way through to what will be range-topping plug-in hybrid technology in our Tank 500 and in our Canon Alpha. So again, a demonstration of the breadth of technology, but the investment in technology going into this from GWM to give our customers choice here in Australia and New Zealand.
There is so much happening in the world of GWM. You just covered off on a lot. Before we get into the next part of tonight, just want to give you an opportunity. Is there any other news that we've missed about this range, or for people that are tuning in the first time? Is there anything else, any other insights you can tell us about what might be coming through the pipeline in the not too distant future outside of what we've just mentioned?
Look, we've been pretty open with our our new model sort of launch schedule, we've probably been a bit more open than a lot of other brands. And we've talked about how this year alone, we're going to have 7 either brand new or significantly updated new models coming through. A lot of the cars that you see here, obviously the Canon Alpha, the Tank 500 plug-in, etc., they are on that list. Beyond that, there is significant investment also going into Ora. We can't talk too much about what's coming next year, but again, we've been on the record saying you're going to see 7 new models from GWM this year in 2025. Next year, you're going to see at least that same number again. So we've already got a very, very broad range, be it petrol, be it diesel, and of course the electrified options we're here today to talk about, but there's significantly more coming in the sort of medium to short term as well to get excited about.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, I love getting these insights, and I'm trying to do my best to nudge him into, leaking something that he might not be supposed to. So we love our insights here on the Inside Live GWM events. But there's a lot to take in. I'm sure all of you watching have probably already got burning questions, so make sure you're putting them in a comment. As I said before, we're going to get to the live Q&A section a little bit later on, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can live. But the ones that we can't get to live, someone from GWM will answer them online over the coming week. But I'd love to get into more of a discussion on why this lineup is so important and your democratisation of powertrains. And to help us do that, I'm going to invite another guest onto camera for this discussion. He is a senior automotive journalist and he's been an industry commentator for over 25 years. Mike Sinclair.
Hey,
Mike,
Luke.
welcome.
Hey, boys.
Welcome.
Hello, viewers. Yeah.
It's so good to have you.
It is exciting,
here.
isn't it? There's so much stuff happening across the whole industry, and you guys are right at the forefront with what you're doing with your powertrains.
It's an exciting time, and we were talking before, and I think we're going through what we'd agree is probably the biggest change we've ever seen in this industry, and we've got lots to unpack today.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest change I've seen since maybe the stop of local manufacturing, which was, over a decade ago. New brands, new technology, and new legislation.
And this is exactly why we wanted you to join us tonight, Mike. Obviously, Steve and I are talking a lot about the world of GWM, so it's nice to have someone from the outside come on in to have a bit more of an open, honest discussion around this. And for people watching at home that might not know what the new vehicle efficiency standard is all about and why the government is introducing it this year, could you maybe give us a little bit of a high-level overview of what it all encapsulates?
Sure. NVES, which is the new vehicle efficiency standard, not emission standard, is actually about reducing emissions. It's about reducing CO2 emissions, and what it is, it's a bit of a carrot and stick legislation that's going to encourage manufacturers to bring in more efficient vehicles, more modern powertrains into the Australian marketplace. It will probably change the landscape a bit. It could potentially change costs. What it will do is it will make sure that there's a reducing level of CO2 that manufacturers have to meet. And if they don't meet them, the potential is from 28 onwards that they will pay fines until they do meet them. So it is big.
They get the stick.
Yeah.
They get the stick.
Well, I'd love to dive into this conversation with you both. So why don't we grab a seat and we'll get into it.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Okay, so there's a little bit more to discuss around this topic, Mike, now that we've established what the NVES is. I've noticed there's been a little bit of talk and chatter, obviously, with our upcoming elections, that if an opposition government was to get in, they might change or scrap it altogether. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, is that a possibility?
Look, they've certainly been making noise about making changes. I think the reality is that we're not going to see absolute dumping of it. We're one of the few, or we were one of the few countries in the world that didn't have this sort of scheme. Manufacturers are working in an environment where those schemes are global. We might see, if there's a change of government, maybe some changes to the financial side of it when the fines come in. They don't currently come in until 28. That might be dumbed down a little bit, but yeah, who knows?
So, if it does go ahead as planned, how do you see the automotive landscape changing in the near future? Like, what will be the first few things to change?
Well, as you can see from what GWM's doing, the manufacturers are looking at different sorts of powertrain options. And Steve can probably answer this as well as I can, but we're going to see more lower emission options. We might see some higher emitting vehicles maybe disappear from the marketplace. But Australia's a really unique market. It's really heavy on big SUVs, it's really heavy on utes, and those are the vehicles that arguably will need to change the most as this legislation comes in.
Steve, is there anything you want to add to that in terms of GWM's position and where you've been looking at things that you've needed to change, you know, in the not too distant future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting conundrum, this whole NVES thing, for the whole industry, not just for GWM, for every other brand out there who's trying to navigate their way through this. Now, we've done our modelling, I'm sure most of the other brands have done theirs, and look, we think we're in a relatively good position now. As Mike said, there's essentially fines and penalties that come in 2028 for those companies who have not been able to get to that balance of you know, efficiency right. But ultimately, you know, we see it ultimately as hybrid, plug-in hybrid being really important to us in terms of us being able to get to the right numbers that the legislation is asking us to get to. But for us, we're looking beyond just plug-in hybrid, EV and hybrid. We do think it's going to be a massive part of the future technology rollout moving forward, not just for us, but again for other brands. And Mike made the point that most other countries have got this type of legislation. So what that means is that this type of technology, EV, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, is coming and is going to grow in this market, whether we like it or not.
The really important thing about this is that this legislation it's technologically agnostic. It's not saying Australia needs to go to EV. What it's saying is we need to reach these CO2 levels. And plug-in hybrid, great solution. I drive a plug-in hybrid myself. Works really well, particularly in heavier vehicles. I mean, you know, long term, we're not going to see that much effectiveness of battery electric utes for a while, but we will see a lot of plug-in hybrid utes, and they'll work well.
That comment that Mike just said about it being sort of technology agnostic is an interesting one I'd like to pick up on, because you know, ultimately we, as we said earlier, we're still developing internal combustion engines. We don't expect them to disappear anytime overnight. We want to give customers choice, but ultimately, if we want to be able to maintain diesel and petrol technology in our lineup as GWM, we're going to have to maximise the cut through that these vehicles have. But ultimately, it's going to come down to usability, and it's going to come down to value, which is why when we talk about the range, the value, that stuff's really important. We can't expect customers to jump into new technology unless it works for them, unless the value's there, and that's exactly what we're focused on delivering.
So I'm going to ask you straight up then, how concerned is GWM about the changes being made?
Look, I don't think we are concerned. As a brand, we're not concerned. I mean, obviously there's a lot to consider. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of us as a brand working out what that means for us, our financial future, us being able to offer the right technology to the customers. But from a product and technology rollout, we're actually very, very comfortable, and I think we are one of the better positioned brands in terms of being
operating in a vacuum, are you?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
You know, the whole world is putting in these sorts of legislation.
Absolutely.
Europe is much tougher than it is here.
Yep.
The States, well, who knows what's going to happen with the States?
Well, California's going purely electric in the not too distant
future.
future.
Well, they will, unless the big orange bloke decides that California's not part of America. I don't know who knows what he can do. But yeah, it'll be a really interesting place. And you guys globally, you know, one of the great things about these bigger groups, and you know, whether it be a Chinese group, an American group, a European group, is they've got the technological muscle and they've got the cash to do the research and to change the powertrains. So that's an important part of what's happening too.
And again, it's not just about future technology development. We're here, we've got this future here today. This is exactly what we've been talking about on this live stream today. We've got it here, so this lineup behind us, it shows our level of confidence that we're ready for it. But there's more to come. We're going to have to face that, as is every other brand. So, you know, we're ready and we're quietly confident to head into the NVES future.
It's great to hear you say that. And Mike, I'm going to come to you for this, without necessarily, you know, naming and shaming or anything, but will there be some brands here in Australia that are going to struggle with this?
Look, there's definitely going to be some brands that their current product lineup doesn't sit well with how the NVES is structured. You know, I talked a little bit a while ago about how heavy we are in utes and SUVs. So there's some breaks in the legislation that allows a higher output, or higher emission output for these sorts of vehicles. And you know, look, a question back to Steve. I know that there's been some press that you know you guys have got where it's been suggested that you might be one of the brands that sort of are not in great shape.
Yep.
But, you know, is that the case?
It's a good question, and obviously we've talked about this, and there's reports suggesting that GWM might be amongst a list of brands who maybe aren't going to come out of this particularly well. What's interesting about that piece is, though, that piece was written on the assumption of understanding what GWM's product portfolio is going to look like in the future. Ultimately, GWM's the only people, you know, we're the only group of people that know that right now. Future technology rollout is not included in any of those comments. We know where we're heading, we've done the modelling, so for us, I reckon we're actually in a pretty strong position, Mike. As we've talked about, we're going to have 4 plug-in hybrids by the end of this year. The hybrid range will grow. There'll be even more to come next year, so I think we'll be okay.
There's some particular stuff in the legislation where for instance, body-on-frame vehicles like the Canon Alpha here. If that's a 2-wheel drive vehicle, it's really heavily hit under the legislation because it's got the heavy 4-wheel drive tech, powertrain, but it's in a 2-wheel drive category for lower emissions. So there's some odds and ends there that the government and manufacturers will have to sort out. That's not an issue you face.
No, correct. I mean, obviously, again, that's one of the reasons, and purely on a technology basis, why you're seeing things like plug-in hybrid technology coming into that space. It has to happen. We know that it's going to give us additional performance, additional efficiency, but ultimately we've got to meet legislative needs, not just here in Australia, but as Mike said, in overseas markets as well.
So GWM is doing a great job, I feel, of, like you I love that phrase, the democratisation of powertrains across the range. It almost protects you a little bit too, in terms of if the market does suddenly start to skew towards a particular type of vehicle, you're already offering an efficient powertrain in that range. Mike, do you see that happening as we move forward? Like, will the Australian market start to move away from certain vehicles and towards others?
I talk a lot on radio and on television about the fact that, where there's a suggestion that there's one size fits all for going forward for motorists, in Australia. That's not going to be the case. There will definitely be horses for courses. Plug-in hybrid with a petrol engine, really effective for heavier vehicles, smaller vehicles. Right now, EVs make sense for a lot of Australians if they live in town and they can plug in and charge at home. There will be technologies that we don't even know about yet that will come out, in the fullness of time, that will change things again. So it's going to be a moving feast. We've had one solution really since the motor car was invented, and that was the internal combustion engine. We're going to have a lot more going forward.
Yeah, whatever happened to hydrogen?
Well, again, GWM's got buses running about in China on hydrogen GWM power plants right now, so it's there. Whether that's the right technology, we're not going to see it certainly in the short term here within Australia in any mass scale, but that's again another thing that GWM and some other brands are working on. But for us, we think hybrid plug-in hybrids where it's at. But to your point, we as a brand, we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner. There are other brands that are coming in who are focused purely on EV. That's not us, because we think we'd like to think that we're bringing the technology in as that mass adoption is becoming, it's happening within the Australian market. Yeah, we've got the Ora EV here, but we know that EV sales have probably plateaued and come off right now. Plug-in hybrid and hybrids where it's at, so we're focusing on that, but we'll bring these EV technologies in at the right time as well. Hopefully, that's the plan at least.
And you've even added a diesel powertrain to one of your vehicles.
Correct, and that comes back to again this customer choice piece, Mike, and ultimately we can continue selling diesel for the next 3, 4, 5 years, even with penalties on it. If the uptake of the other technologies is enough, we can use the credits against those powertrains to maintain petrol and diesel for our customers and give them choice. Exactly.
Those carrots instead of a stick.
Correct. Yep.
And as a consumer, you were talking earlier about the H6 GT plug-in hybrid, and that capabilities of doing well over 100 kilometres just on pure EV. So that ticks the EV box during the week. But then when us Aussies want to get out and embark on the great road trip, you've got that petrol power there to get you from Melbourne to Sydney without having to plot out where you need to stop to charge. And
that's almost for me why it makes it the Goldilocks car. It's the best of both worlds. If you want to run it as a normal internal combustion engine, you can. If you want to run it as a pure EV, you can. And again, the use cases we talked about earlier, in theory, you could commute in that 5 days a week and never have to fill it up. Again, you've got the best of both worlds there. So for us, I think there's been a lot of talk around EV for good reason over the past few years. But I think now that the battery technology has moved on and plug-in hybrid, combining that with an internal combustion engine, for me, certainly is a no-brainer. And I think we're going to see a huge uptick in plug-in hybrids.
I think there was a lot of misinformation early on about plug-in hybrids, about them being too heavy, having 2 powertrains, those sorts of things. I think that as the technology matures, as we get, Steve saying, better electric range out of them, more efficient powertrains, they're just going to get more and more efficient, more and more attractive. I think they're a great solution for Australians. As I said, I drive a plug-in hybrid myself. It's not one of yours, but But it's
we must work on that, Mike.
So, Mike, we've got a lot of people watching right now, and ultimately, I'm sure they're concerned about how the NVES is going to affect automotive manufacturers. How might that then affect Australian consumers with that flow on?
There's a number of ways it's going to affect things, Luke. One of the things it's going to do is it's going to change the choice of cars that people get to pick from. It will increase the range of more efficient options. Probably see more brands doing plug-in hybrid, more brands doing electrified vehicles of some type. The other thing inevitably too is it's going to affect price. It's not going to be there was a lot of, again, misinformation, a lot of scare tactics on how much it might change pricing. New technology is typically more expensive. What it's not going to do though is it's not going to stop you being able to buy the type of vehicle you want and you need. I need to occasionally tow a race car. I need to often tow a boat. So I chose a big plug-in hybrid because that's what it suits me. There'll be people out there who can make educated choices and they'll have more stuff to choose from.
Just to Mike's point, let me jump in there as well, because Mike's raised a really good point that I'd like to address, just around the perception or the reality as it may be, that a lot of these vehicles under an NVES scheme are going to have to rise in price. Now, there is the stick mentality that we've talked about that sort of drives some of this in the back end, and there's no doubt that for a lot of brands, or most brands, to be able to meet the penalties that the government's going to levy on the less efficient cars, price is ultimately going to have to rise. For us though, again, we're relatively comfortable that if that happens and the NVES rolls out the way we think it will with the penalties in a couple of years' time, it's all about relative positioning for GWM though, because at the moment I don't think anyone could argue we're in a very, very strong value position. And when we compare ourselves with other sort of segment competitors, we're very comfortable where our value position sits. Now equally, if that means we're going to have to potentially move up in price, the other competitors within that segment are going to have to do the same. So it's a relative movement, and ultimately, yes, that may mean that for consumers in some segments, prices will rise. But from a GWM perspective, that value equation that we've got today, we believe we're still going to be able to maintain that moving forward and give our customers choice in value and technology.
And another thing I'll jump in on, there's a bit of misinformation, I've seen this printed as well, is that somehow NVES will be levied on used cars. It's only on new cars.
Yeah.
It inevitably will have some effect on the relative pricing of used cars, but it's not something you're going to have to pay on your existing car annually or anything like that. It's not that sort of scheme.
I'll take it back a step further too, because I know a lot of people will get confused between the difference of a hybrid vehicle and a plug-in hybrid.
Yep.
Can you quickly just take us through the difference between a full EV hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and maybe just a couple of the pros and cons to each as consumers see it at the moment?
Sure. So, I mean, full EV essentially, it has nowhere to put petrol in it at all. You plug it into a source of power and you charge a battery on board. It has electric motors that power the wheels. A plug-in hybrid is, imagine taking that EV and adding an engine to it, an engine that, depending on the type of plug-in hybrid, can often be directly connected to the wheels. It might be what we call an EREV, or an extended range electric vehicle. Plug-in hybrid can operate typically on power on electricity, as we've heard. H6 GT up to 180 k's. Typically, most vehicles somewhere in the 50 to 100 k range. Hybrid is, and Steve will hate me saying this, but hybrid are vehicles with extra electricity on board, but they're not electric vehicles. So essentially, they are using, they're largely powered by petrol or diesel, and they're having some electric help along the way.
Electrified, shall we say.
Electrified, yeah. So, many hybrid vehicles have been around for a long while. Plug-in hybrid is probably the area that's growing, and it's the most recent one. In terms of pros and cons, we've been sort of talking about that all night, The one that sits in the middle, plug-in hybrid, is that one that has probably the best of both worlds in many ways.
And you've probably seen that reflected in sales recently, with GWM doing extremely well in the past.
Plug-in hybrid is new for us. I mean, the H6 GT PHEV has only been on sale for the last couple of months, but already the plug-in hybrid demand for this is outstripping petrol. Hybrid is still growing very, very strongly for us, and we do have a longer history in hybrid. On the H6, for example, the current version of the car that you see behind us, we sell more hybrids in that car than we do petrol. We weren't there 2 years ago. Petrol was dominant in that car, but already in 2 years we've seen hybrid come on strong. Equally, we expect that the plug-in hybrid will come on, if not stronger, over the next couple of years, we think, as well.
So the next couple of years is going to be big. Like you said, 2028's where sticks, penalties could be introduced. How different do you think the top 10 manufacturers, selling manufacturers in Australia is going to look in 2 years?
Gee, that's a really big question because there are so many new brands coming to the marketplace. I don't think NVES alone is not going to decide where that ends up. We're going to see, a bunch of new brands, relative value across those brands. Whether existing brands, add more types of vehicles to their fleet. I think the one thing you can say is it's going to continue to change. We've seen significant change in the last 3 to 5 years. We probably haven't seen as much change as we have in the last 18 months, and it will continue to change. More Chinese brands coming in. Some of the European brands perhaps exiting parts of the market or going further down in terms of the numbers they sell. It's going to be very interesting times.
It's changing already, Luke. The top 10, again, since our last Inside GWM live stream, GWM had another record month last month, which put us year to date number 7. So well within the top 10 now, sitting at number 7. Again, we hope to grow that. We don't take that for granted. We're going to have to work hard to make that happen. It's a super competitive marketplace. But again, if you look back on where GWM as a brand was 2 years ago, we were nowhere near the top 10. So that's even without NVES or the technology rollout we're going to have. And as Mike said, there's a lot of other competitive brands out there. It's a very, very interesting time to be in the industry.
And I think just the fact that about 1 in 3 new cars currently sold in Australia is a ute. And we've had a significant uptick in the number of brands that are bringing utes in. That by just alone is going to change the face of the market.
Absolutely. Well, there are a lot of questions coming in across our different live stream platforms, gentlemen. So we might get into this because I'll be interested to hear both your insights.
We love this bit.
So first question, Joseph, how are the automakers working to make NEVs more affordable and accessible? So maybe we'll go to Mike first and you can talk about the industry and
Joseph,
then we'll come to...
Look, globally, the volume of the new energy vehicles, the fact that they're growing, that in itself is going to make them more affordable, cheaper. They are inevitably currently more expensive to build because they're covering costs of research and all those sorts of things. But as they scale and as the technology matures, they're going to get cheaper.
From a GWM perspective, I'd argue that we already are offering well-priced and value-stacked hybrids. The Jolion hybrid that's sitting up the back that we talked about earlier, $31,990 for, which is a small SUV, almost a mid-sized SUV. There's significant value in that. If you'd asked anyone what it was going to cost you to get into a hybrid vehicle that's nearly a mid-sized size, you'd have been well into the 40s even 3 or 4 years ago. So the prices are coming down. But again, as Mike said, it's about scale. Ultimately, there is more technology in a hybrid vehicle. Technology development costs money, but over time, those costs will come down.
I think that's perfectly answered, gentlemen. Drew has asked, this is probably one for you, Steve. Will the Alpha plug-in hybrid come with black badging?
It's a very good question and a good pickup, Drew, if you've actually been wondering why we're looking at this particular spec of vehicle that we are. This car here that we're using tonight is a pre-production vehicle. It's not full Australian production spec. We've been using this for a bit of testing, a bit of PR work on the way through ahead of launch.
You've just had the chrome one, so we couldn't tell it was a plug-in hybrid,
Correct,
didn't you?
absolutely. So the plug-in hybrid versions of the Canon Alpha will come with what we know as the Vanta pack, so the blackout pack with the black grille, the black door mirrors, black wheels, etc. So there will be black badging on that car as well. So in fact, we've got a full black colour, one of them top to bottom black. It looks great. So yeah, good pickup, but certainly that chrome grille that you see on this car and the chrome parts, they will become black on the Canon Alpha PHEV when it's launched within the next month or so.
That'll look quite good, Mike. We enjoy a blacked out vehicle here in Australia, don't we?
Absolutely.
Our matte black accessories.
So they have black wheels as well.
Indeed, indeed. And just a little bit of insight. Anyone who wonders where the term Vanta came from, Vanta black is a colour that was invented by the US Air Force. the darkest possible shade of black to avoid detection from enemy and satellites, etc., etc. So we sort of leveraged that, and we thought that's a great name, Vanta. So hence, if anyone's ever wondering why we call it Vanta, that's where we pulled it from.
Did you clear that with the big orange guy?
We didn't. We might have a chat a little later on that one, Mike. But no, he hasn't pulled us up on it yet.
Yeah,
So.
it's only a matter of time.
Okay, the Pink Tank has asked, will the Alpha plug-in hybrid XSR variant come to Australia?
Possibly. Again, you would recall that's a car, again, we did a live stream on. We did one of those from an outside broadcast, and we powered our live broadcast using the V2L technology a few months back. It's not on the launch schedule just yet, but we do love the look of it. We do love the technology. It's something we've put our hand up and said, please, can we have? So again, not confirmed, but watch this space.
V to L and that sort of stuff, it's like fantastic for tradespeople. It's one of those things that, you know, we wouldn't have thought as an advantage of new energy vehicles, but, you know, as more plug-in hybrid utes become available, that's the sort of thing you can do on a work site.
Absolutely, work site or lifestyle. You know, you take yourself out into the middle of the bush and suddenly you've got a powered campsite.
Yep.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Jack has asked, I've seen the Canon Alpha plug-in hybrid on the website. It seems quite the car. Well, that's not a question, Jack. That's a statement, and we love that statement. Thank you very much. Have you had a chance to drive the Canon Alpha?
I have had not the plug-in hybrid yet. I've driven the Canon Alpha, and yeah, it's a good ute.
All right, honesty time. Here we go. What did you think? What did you love about it?
Look, I'm a really hard marker on utes. I have a ute. I'm not a huge ute fan. I'd much prefer to drive a SUV than a ute, but as utes go, it's a good one. The important thing I think too is, and you know, I'll jump back into the plug-in hybrid world again here, is that one thing that I think you guys have done well is that your plug-in hybrid ute will still have the full towing capacity. So you're not going to have.
Correct.
One of the challenges with some of the technology that you can do a plug-in with, you can basically make a plug-in, you can have an electric ute and have a motor there that powers the battery. That when you get down on power, the whole system derates. It's not going to give you the same performance that you would have on a full traditional hybrid. These ones aren't going to do that. These ones will give you full performance because essentially it's an ICE engine as well as the electric drivetrain.
Something some of our viewers, if you haven't already seen it, our friends at Car Expert took one of our pre-production Canon Alphas and they did some towing tests with it, which went live last week. Now, again, to Mike's point, when you tow anything in any powertrain, your fuel consumption is going to go up by virtue of the load you're pulling, the aerodynamics. Your fuel consumption is always going to worsen. To Mike's point again, with plug-in hybrid, particularly with the engine setup we've got here, against other plug-in hybrid utes, we've come out very, very well in terms of real-world fuel consumption. So again, if you haven't looked at it, jump online and have a look at the Canon Alpha plug-in towing test that was done by Car Expert last week. It's interesting watching.
Yeah, look, one of the things I'm interested to see too is what these guys do with, I'm not sure whether everybody knows, but GWM has announced that they're going to be doing some local tuning of their vehicles, and I think that's a really important part of the evolution of the brand, because Australian road conditions and Australian, how Australian uses vehicles are different from other parts of the world. So I'm really interested to see what happens with this vehicle as it develops with more local input.
So Rob Tribbiani, who's our new vehicle dynamics engineer, he's already getting his hands on this and seeing what he can do. He's on a tight timeline for this car, given we're launching it within the next month or so, but we are going to see what we can do within that timeline, but that's only going to be the start of what he can do. We are looking to develop an Australian tune for these vehicles, a GWM family feel, if you will, which will eventually go down damper settings, could be a potential tyre program, steering calibrations, bushes, whatever that might look like. But ultimately, certainly a ute is always going to drive different from an SUV, but what we hope to get to is a tune that is more akin to what Australians look for, more akin to the coarse bitumen that we have in our roads, and then ultimately have something which is similar across the whole range.
Mike, let's take this a step further, because how important is that to Australian consumers? Obviously, Aussies have turned to a couple of well-known established brands for utes that have done very well in sales, for a very long time. How can the Canon, start to chip away and strip back at some of those sales? Do you see that happening, and how much do you see this market continuing to grow?
I think the ute market is arguably, as I said, so many people buy utes. It's arguably one of the most competitive markets in the Australian landscape. So you have to have a good product. Your product has to be up there. I think one of the interesting things that will happen is as this company's footprint here matures, as the Australian consumer matures, then they'll start to. They won't just look at price. They won't just look at a spec sheet. They'll be thinking about how the vehicle drives. One of the interesting things is that consumers won't necessarily know that it's the steering, it's changes to the steering or changes to the dampers, the shock absorbers that make the car better. But what they'll do is they'll get in and they'll feel the car is better. They'll feel it's more secure on the road. They'll feel it's nicer to drive, and that sort of stuff is where that filters through. So between the engineers and the production area, there's that area of fine tuning that will develop and will improve. The reason some of the established brands do so well, and have that feel that Aussies like, is because they've been doing it for a damn long time. So Rob Tribbiani, he can't say, but like ex HSV, ex Holden, the guy's done it for decades. He knows how to do it.
Fantastic. That's what we like to hear. Okay, next question. I've seen the Canon. Oh no, sorry, that was the lovely comment from Jack. Jamie's asked, any idea if and when the Tank 300 plug-in hybrid will come out in Australia?
Great question, but no confirmation on a 300 plug-in hybrid just yet. We have confirmed 4 plug-in hybrids for GWM down under this year. There is more. There is more in the works, but that's probably as much as I can tell tonight. But again, as you hear me say a lot, watch this space. There is more coming, but 300, let's wait and see. Look, what I would say on that as well,
my little birdie's telling me that you're going to have plug-in hybrids of pretty much everything.
What I would say to that, Mike, is, and you're probably not too far from the truth, if you think about the technology sitting under this car, the technology that's sitting underneath the Tank 500 plug-in hybrid, that Hi4T technology, we have got Hi4Z coming as well, but that's another story for another evening. But ultimately, if we're talking about the same platform, we're talking about 2 of these cars on that platform already have that technology. It wouldn't be too far a stretch to say that we may get that technology in the future, but not yet confirmed.
Is that a scoop? Hi4Z?
I think that's a slight insight.
Hi4Z has been unveiled globally, and Hi4Z is a bit more related to motors on the rear as opposed to the full mechanical setup we've got. Yep. There is different uses in terms of how we want to use hybrid technology. At the moment, Hi4T is where our focus is for Australia.
And that's a very perceptive pick up there, Mike, because I'm actually seeing a couple of questions coming through about different models coming in plug-in hybrid, so well picked up on. Jax has asked, GWM's Hi4Z is similar to BYD DMO drive. Does GWM plan to offer the Hi4Z given the current perceived limitations of the Shark?
That's a great question. I'll give you my view on that, and then Mike, maybe you can give us an independent view of where you see that. That's exactly the reason that we have chosen Hi4T rather than Hi4Z in this car. We've been very, very deliberate in how we have spec'd and engineered this car for Australia. This truly is a plug-in hybrid dual cab ute, which is designed perfectly for Australian conditions. We need to keep in mind also that Australia is the second largest export market globally for GWM. So when they're building these utes, they're thinking first and foremost about us. We would sell more utes than anyone else globally. So we made a decision that we wanted not just 3.5 ton towing capacity, we wanted off-road capability. We know that the Hi4T technology with a full mechanical linkage is going to give better off-road performance than a motor on the rear. So we're comfortable with the decision we've made. We think it's the right technology for this car. But Mike, I don't know if you think.
Well, look, I think the simple answer is if you took, you take a Canon Alpha, a traditional ICE vehicle, and you look at the drivetrain of that, it's a pretty heavy-duty drivetrain. What the plug-in hybrid Canon Alpha is basically adds electrification forward of the gearbox effectively. So what it's doing is it's giving you all that heavy-duty drivetrain, and it's giving an electrified power plant. I think that says to me that the thing's actually fit for purpose rather than being something that is a nice light-duty solution. these are heavy duty. You know, all the electric vehicles that work really well off road have those complex, you know, mechanical drivetrains.
As I alluded to earlier as well, Mike, and Luke and the audience out there, we've got some video of Tim, who some of you will know from the other Inside GWM live streams, who's not well and couldn't join us tonight. But Tim's actually done some work off-road and has taken these pre-production high 4T models off-road. And just to sort of emphasize the point that Mike has just made, these cars with this technology, with that mechanical linkage, have made it over pieces of terrain, fairly aggressive terrain, that other utes that shall remain nameless who maybe don't have this technology have been unable to do. So again, that gives us the confidence that we've made the right technology decision with this car.
I mean, a pure electric vehicle can be an exceptional off-road vehicle. I mean, you know, the huge mining trucks that are used in our open cut mines around Australia are effectively electric vehicles. They're effectively hybrids. They have wheel motors, those sorts of things. That's the absolute extreme, but we're not going to see that in these sorts of products anytime soon.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one final question, different for both of you. So, Mike, firstly, we'll go to you. NVES, good, bad, why?
Inevitable, I guess, is the answer. You know, we're one of the few countries in the world that didn't have that sort of CO2-based scheme. You know, there is a global requirement to reduce CO2 emissions. The automotive space is an important part of reducing those emissions. We had to go somewhere. I think the compromise that the government struck is a reasonable compromise, and you know, as we've seen, most manufacturers are moving to being able to work with it pretty quickly.
And Steve, I think you've alluded to it and you've said enough, but GWM customers or future customers, should they be concerned?
Short answer to that, Luke, is no. I think ultimately this is going to give customers more choice in terms of more fuel efficient vehicles, and that's exactly the way it's been designed, is to give customers more ability to get into a fuel efficient vehicle. We've talked a lot about what that may do to prices, to value, etc., etc. Certainly I can't speak for other brands, but I can speak for GWM and say that, look, we're going to have plenty of powertrain options. We're not going to paint ourselves or any customers into a corner to say that you have to have plug-in hybrid, you have to have EV, or you have to have hybrid. If we get this right, and we believe we're very firmly on track to do that, that will allow us to keep petrol and diesel longer than other brands may be able to. So again, we're ready, and what we say to our customers and potential future customers are, get in, drive one of these things, experience the technology for yourself, but we have got choices and we're ready to face what's ahead of us.
Well, Steve, Mike, first time here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yep. Thank you.
Both your insights and knowledge is top shelf, so I'm sure everyone out there has really enjoyed that. And again, if you've still got questions, pop them in a comment and someone from GWM will get around to you in the next week to hopefully answer them. That was a fantastic discussion. Now, if you are keen to learn more about the full GWM range, all these vehicles behind us and so much more, and even book a test drive for yourself, visit gwmanz.com and you can find out everything you need to know about the full GWM range. Finally, whether you're new to the brand or a lifelong fan, we love having you join us for these events. They would be pretty pointless without you, so thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you got a lot out of it. Keep your eye on the website and social channels for upcoming news and dates on when the next live stream will be. But for now, that's all from us. Drive safely, and we'll see you next month.